Marie-Chantal, clinical audiologist and tinnitus specialist. My clients know that I promote a holistic approach to the management of chronic health conditions such as tinnitus. This video does apply to everyone all over the world, however. In order to reap maximum results for my patients with sustainable outcomes, I do recommend combining clinical scientific methodology with natural methods such as meditation. Research shows that meditation is an effective method in reducing anxiety, stress-induced conditions, and pain intensity in patients. Best of all, it's accessible to everyone. It is all within us. In this episode, I interview Pauline McKinnon, the founding patron of Meditation Australia, the Australian peak body representing meditation and meditation teachers. Pauline is also an author, psychotherapist, and founding director of the Stillness Meditation Therapy Centre in Melbourne. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to pass it on to someone who you think may benefit. Pauline, thanks for joining us. So you founded the Meditation Association of Australia. Can you actually tell us what made you start something like this?
I've been teaching meditation for quite a while at that point, Marie-Chantal, and I think that I was not mainstream meditation teaching, and it was a different world, because I was really, I suppose, a sort of middle class person in the leafy suburbs of Melbourne, not wearing robes and not jangling beads, nothing esoteric like that. And so I felt quite distinctive, I suppose, sometimes a bit lonely, because it was a different kind of role. Because there were, of course, meditation was being taught in yoga situations and that kind of thing, but not in the more clinical sense, which is what I was had gravitated to. So I think I wanted to, as time moved on and I could see that various kinds of meditation were cropping up in different ways, I wanted to see it elevated to what I believed was its more healing benefits, rather than something that people associated only with yoga or with esoteric practices. And I thought it was important to make it more mainstream and more available to people generally.
Okay, so am I correct in saying that, so you have a clinical background, is that correct?
I evolved into a clinical background. I didn't begin that way. I began because of my own life story, really. So I don't know whether you want to go there at this point, but that's where...
Well, that actually brings me to my next question, is what led you to practice meditation in the first place? So let's go there.
Yes. So in my 20s, newly married with 2 infant children at that time, I experienced a massive panic attack one day and really thought the end of the world had come. I really was most distressed by the whole outcome of it, and it left me highly anxious, in a very anxious and distressed state for a long period of time. And in fact, over an 8-year period, I was virtually agoraphobic, someone who really couldn't freely leave the safety of home, really feeling out of control, recurring panic, recurring anxiety feelings, and so on. Excuse me. So, of course, I tried all sorts of remedies, medicine, of course, the doctors, the psychiatrists, the psychologists, all sorts of avenues to seek relief, because in those days, and I'm talking quite a while ago, there were not, anxiety wasn't recognised publicly. It was almost something to feel embarrassed and ashamed. Well, I felt embarrassed and ashamed, because it seemed such a trivial kind of reaction to life, you know, when the general outlook of humanity puts a lot of importance upon success and confidence and being out there and so on. And so, because it wasn't well known, it was kind of under wraps, and I felt it just increased the anxiety situation for me, really. Anyway, a long story, but eventually I quite accidentally or providentially found my way to the work of Dr. Meers. And it was he whose method and whose ideas and sort of philosophy transformed my life. It was ultimately simple, but it took a complicated journey to get there.
Yeah.
So that was the turning point. And then in 1983, I published my story, because by then I realized I picked up little hints of the fact that I wasn't the only person on the planet with these awful feelings. And so I thought, well, it's time to try to show something different to other people, and to kind of ratify Dr. Meers' work in a way, because I mean, he didn't need my help, but I felt that his work wasn't being valued sufficiently. And to some extent it still isn't really. And I'm the flag bearer, you know. But that's what led me into meditation. So he wrote the foreword to my first book, and I think he was pleased to feel that a patient could take that step. And it wasn't an easy step either, because it really meant going quite public on something that I'd kept very private for a long time. Yes.
Yeah.
So he then said to me, you should start teaching others what I've taught you, because anxiety is a big problem out there. And so that's what led me to take courage and start to teach other people.
And so it is the proper hero's journey.
I think so, in a way.
Yeah. So this is the book that you're speaking of now, Let Stillness Conquer Fear. So in a nutshell, how would you summarize this book?
Well, the most recent edition is 2016. It's a thicker book by a long way than the original. So it still tells my story very authentically, and I think that's what helps people. But it also outlines a lot of the more recent understandings on the management of anxiety.
Which is something that's so prevalent nowadays, especially in this pandemic, especially just with the modern day world and the fast-paced nature of our lifestyles. Anxiety is very common.
Very common.
There are two schools that get swapped around quite easily, which is meditation and mindfulness. And so even myself, when I first started meditating, doing guided meditation, that's what I really like to do. I wasn't aware that mindfulness was actually quite different to meditation. Can you define those two for us?
Well, I'll do my best, because I don't teach mindfulness, but in my understanding, and I know this is a fact, mindfulness meditation is really a Buddhist spiritual or philosophical teaching. And I think that, in more recent years, mindfulness meditation has become, I wouldn't like to say trendy exactly, but it's become very popularized. And I think in that popularization, there's been some sort of shift where some people seem to like the idea of mindfulness as an active practice, and some people like to think of the meditation side of it, probably incorporating the elements of mindfulness. I'm not an expert in mindfulness. This is just my observation. What I am concerned about really is the proliferation of almost a trivialization of those practices, because we've seen colouring books, and we've seen free apps, and we've seen a kind of commercialization of something that is much deeper than that, I think, if it's true to its cause. But again, it's not my form of practice.
So I understand what you're saying about the trivialization of mindfulness, and perhaps it's something that's become so mainstream that it's looked at as a trendy thing to do, as opposed to something that is actually destined to or designed to heal, something that's quite personal for the person.
That's my concern in that, yeah.
So how have you seen meditation? Actually, let's go into what are some different types of meditation that you've practiced yourself, or you've seen others practice, or you've taught?
Well, guided meditation has been around for a long time. And as I said earlier, meditation incorporated with yoga is a common practice. But there are many, many approaches to meditation. if we look right back and really appreciate that meditation per se has been a practice among certain cultures for thousands and thousands of years, and not just Indian, as we most commonly recognize, but certainly in the Middle East and in Christianity and throughout the ages. So there's been a spiritual background to those kinds of meditation. I brought up a Catholic, and I am very familiar with meditation retreats and meditation, guided meditation, spiritual meditation, that kind of thing as well. But the meditation that I teach, because it worked for me, it changed my life, is very different to all of those. It's about a physiological approach to meditation. And maybe that physiology has always existed within meditation, but not been teased out or recognized in the same way that Dr. Meers, who was an eminent psychiatrist, in the same way that he appreciated it and drew from it the essence of stillness to help people rest their mind effectively and therefore change their physiological reaction to stress and therefore change the potential to change their life.
I want to go further into the physiology behind it, or this specific approach that changed your life. Can you elaborate on that? Because I don't know if you said it or I missed it, but I'm really curious.
Well, Dr. Meers was a psychiatrist, lived in Melbourne, but very well renowned throughout the world, really. He first studied agricultural science, which is an interesting twist, before even going to medicine. I always think it's valuable because to have a background in science like that is a good starting point. It's very earthy, the agricultural aspect of learning. And then he decided to study medicine, and he graduated in about the mid-1940s at the end of the Second World War, and he was sent to New South Wales somewhere to look after returned soldiers who had come back, as they said in those days, shell-shocked. We would call it PTSD in today's vocabulary. And he was very moved, I think, by looking after people suffering in that way and the traumatic experiences they'd had and the resultant stress and anxiety and so on. And I think he felt extremely limited by the remedies or the facilities at hand, really very little. And he, with a couple of other colleagues, began to experiment with hypnosis, which was becoming a little bit out of the off the theatrical stage and into a sense of healing too. And they had quite a deal of success. And he went on then to study psychiatry and to incorporate and, in fact, become an expert in clinical hypnosis over the years. And there are many, many books written by him that I believe are still used for those studying hypnotherapy and more. So his interest was very genuine, I think, in trying to look at anxiety or pain, and it was either emotional or physical pain was of great importance to him. So as the years unfolded, he kept using his clinical hypnotherapy skills, but began to see that his patients were getting well when he simply got them to a state of quiescence without actually taking them through any particular suggestivity in the hypnotherapy. Among other things, he travelled widely and he was inspired by various cultures in various ways. And the turning point for him was when he visited Nepal, and again, in probably the 1950s, very difficult times to be in those places. And he came across a very ancient guru, wise man, the Shiva Puri Baba, who was at that time 134 years of age, and had travelled a lot himself and could speak English and could communicate. So they sat together, and this was a really, you know, interesting time and a turning point for Ainsley Meers, because he recognised in this man tremendous calm but tremendous simplicity. And he took these ideas back to what he was doing in Melbourne, and it sort of all came together as an inspiration that he'd been following somehow, that the simplicity and the rest, what he called atavistic regression, atavistic meaning of kind of ancient origin, and the regression meaning slipping back into that quiescent state. And that was the focus, that became the focus of his work then. He really put all his ideals into helping people in that way by taking them into a deep and profound simplicity, not guided, not hypnosis certainly anymore, and definitely this absence of disturbance, where the body would become rested, but most importantly the mind would rest.
That's a wonderful story.
Yeah, it's a long story.
It again is someone who's seeking an answer to the ailments that he was seeing, and it is so simple. And I think that's what happens when you have a chronic health issue. You're looking for an elaborate treatment plan, perhaps.
Yes.
And sometimes something so simple as part of that treatment plan, you tend to brush it off. Well, I know that a lot of people that I treat can look at meditation and brush it off because it seems like it's too simple or it just won't work. But there is a definite magic, and it's not really magic, there's a definite neuroscience to the benefits of meditation.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what now is being discovered in various ways, and that's admirable.
So I'm going to ask you, you've pretty much answered the question anyway, how have you seen meditation help others? Can you give us a story?
I definitely see it help others, there's no doubt about that. And you're so right when you say people brush it off. You know, over the years I've seen probably thousands of people. I wish I'd sort of kept a record, or an accurate record, I mean. And some people do brush it off or won't really, might come 2 or 3 times when it's not going to help them at all, because it's a journey and you have to commence that journey and take for as long as it takes, really. One of the most amazing stories of quite recent times was a lady who came to me about 18 months ago probably now, and she was suffering from grief. She'd lost her husband, but she was physically ailing. She came in on a walking frame. She came in with a friend supporting her emotionally and physically. She was in tears, she was distressed, she was really ill, physically ill in numerous ways. And I almost thought, I don't know why she's come here, because although she was speaking of the fact that it was grief, she was really someone you would have thought needed to be in care at that time. So something had triggered her interest in what I did, and I can't recall exactly why. Maybe she'd read my book or something to that effect, and she saw sort of hope. And of course she was on medication and all kinds of things as well. And so we started the journey, and really, as I say, she was on a walking frame. She was frail, she was insecure, she looked years older than her given age, really. She needed her friend for security. She needed me for security. And so we worked, you know, on a 1-to-1 or 1 and 2 to begin with. And I introduced her gradually to this concept. And the changes were absolutely startling, because I've seen lots and lots of people change, but this was a dramatic shift from a frail old lady to someone who now looks 15 years younger and is out and about and doing the things that she always wanted to do, but had suddenly been really filled by this grief which turned into an illness. And I haven't seen her physically for some weeks now because of the COVID problem, but I know she's doing all right, you know, and she wears bright colours and she's got makeup on and she's come to life. And that's, you know, to me is a story I'll never forget. But there have been lots of other memorable stories too.
I was going to say, with that particular story, you mentioned that she was on medication as well. So what's happening in that space? And is that something that when you treat people, because you are a psychotherapist as well, do you look at when they implement a meditation practice and they are blossoming as a person, do you try and wean them off that medication, that reliance?
I don't take that responsibility. That's up to them and their doctor to decide. And I think in most cases they do, because most people don't want to be on medication, really. They want to wean themselves off it. But like all things, if there's a need, well, that's okay. But I don't take that responsibility. I think it's up to the individual. They know when they can let go.
Because it is something that typically when you've had an anxiety attack or you have a chronic panic cycle or depression, you do go to your GP. They may prescribe you with something, or your psychiatrist with something. And then if you start a meditation practice, or you actually start something that's quite alternative or holistic, and you notice yourself heal, a lot of people actually come off that medication. But you're right in saying you don't take that responsibility. It's really up to the person and the doctor. But it is something to look at as a plus, a bonus component.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Lots and lots of people have been able to come off their medication with me over the years. But as I say, they tell me that. I don't necessarily ask. I just know they're feeling better.
Yeah. Meditation for chronic health issues and chronic pain. What type of meditation do you recommend for that? Because chronic pain is something that a doctor might say, sorry, there's nothing I can do to help you. This is with you for life. You just have to deal with it.
Yes.
How can meditation assist that type of situation?
Well, I think I need to go back to Dr. Meers' work here too, because he was a very interesting man. And one of the things he did to, let's say, help him to affirm what he was teaching was he convinced his dentist to remove, on a couple of different occasions, badly infected or damaged wisdom teeth without anaesthetic. And so he actually went through the process of allowing the dentist to do that very thing, to actually cut the gum and extract, you know, difficult extractions. Yes, and it was written up in the Medical Journal of Australia. I think it was about 1960, early 1960s or something. He did that on 2 occasions because he was so convinced that what he was teaching was valid. He wanted, though, to be able to demonstrate his commitment to that. And I think that's pretty spectacular. You know, you can't get much better proof than that. It's a very invasive thing to face. He was convinced that this system of meditation was valuable in the overcoming of pain, or the sustaining of pain, really. Yeah. And he proved it himself. Now, I know I've had other people come to me with various forms of pain, and they have felt great relief. It's not always easy at first, because what we're teaching people is to let go beyond the pain, not to get involved in the pain. And that's very hard, because when we feel pain, we get involved in it, don't we? You know, there's no doubt about that. That's right. And it can be physical pain or emotional pain. And yet Meers' message was, don't react to it, go beyond it, let go, that kind of thing. And for many, many people, that has worked very, very well. Now, it may not work for everybody, and there's some pain that's perhaps unbelievably unbearable. I would never suggest that people try to manage that if it gets to that point, but I think it's well worth a try along the way.
Would you recommend a guided meditation, or just following your breath? What certain type of meditation would be a good start for someone with chronic pain?
Well, you see, I just come back to what I teach, and that's the simplicity of doing nothing, being still, and letting the body learn that it doesn't have to be so reactive. And that's one of the, I think it's the reactivity that creates anxiety. It is the reactivity that creates anxiety. It's the reactivity that can exacerbate pain. So I have to be honest and say that what I would be recommending is the simplicity and the forbearance, in a way, of the Meers approach. But a lot of people may not be able to face up to that. They might need that sort of guidance, the words or the support or something like that. But that would be my position on this, really.
So for someone who would say meditation's a whole heap of hogwash, what would you say to that type of person?
Oh, well, I've heard that before too. I would say, well, it's not a good idea to jump to conclusions, and maybe you should try it with some determination before you judge, because lots of people have that attitude. Meditation is not the lightweight practice that a lot of people might assume it to be. Like all new ideas, or they're not new ideas, like all, let's say, popular ideas. We can see cartoons about it, we can see jokes made about it, and so on. But realistically, it's a very profound experience.
And how long does it take someone to typically build up that skill? What would your recommendation be? Would you start at 5 minutes consistently every day and build upon that? And then if you are consistent with your practice, then what would it take to become a master meditator?
Well, I don't know about the master meditator. I mean, there are master meditators in various cultures throughout the world who are, probably at a completely different place than I am. But I think that, yes, start small and build up. The sessions that I've taught all these years, and what I learned from Dr. Meers, was to take people in groups for about a 50-minute session, and that's a long time for beginners. But the more people can immerse themselves into the experience, the more result they're going to get. And I was a failure at first. It was very difficult for me because I was so anxious and so reactive. It took me a very long time to be able to truly let go into the absence of disturbance, really. So I'm proud of saying that it took me a long time, because I know that I travelled the difficult roads to get there, the way many other people
I actually
have.
ask you how long it took. Would you be willing?
Yes, well, it took me probably almost 2 years of regular visits twice a week to Dr. Meers before I really could experience exactly what he was getting at, the simplicity and the breakthrough point, where you're not analysing your situation, where you're not resisting the letting go, where you're not paying attention to anything of to get in the way of the stillness experience.
So regardless, you still persisted for 2 years, which is such a feat.
Oh, well, I did, because I trusted him, and also I was seeing little changes. They weren't the profound changes, but they were little shifts, little observations. My mind was less preoccupied with myself and more engaged in life. When I say with myself, I mean with the nasty feelings that I was experiencing, and so on. And I felt I had more control, a calm sort of control. By that time, I had 4 children, and they were all 4 children under the age of 10, which, lots of people have. And but still, I was a busy young mum, so I wasn't as overwhelmed as I had been, and I could face situations differently, little by little by little. But it took a long time for me to really feel that, oh, I know what he means now. Now I've got it. And from there on, it was a much easier and a wonderful road. Yeah.
So did you find that your meditation practice was able to almost rescue you in a time of need when, say, you were having an anxiety attack? Or did you never get there again?
It's more like you never get there again. You can't expect to suddenly meditate in the middle of an anxiety attack.
Yes.
You have to, you see, it's about bringing down the levels of anxiety, and very much so the tension level. People carry a lot of tension. They don't realize that they're doing so. And so part of the secret of this, I think, is really releasing the tension everywhere, body, mind, spirit. And then that becomes more of your modus operandi, so that you're not you're living the calm, not just practicing it at certain times.
Yes, and that's such a great answer.
Yeah, good.
So I do have a question which isn't on our list, but about Vipassana. What type of meditation is that? What is your opinion of Vipassana? And because it is a very intensive experience.
I don't consider myself to be an expert in other methodologies.
So is that a separate, I'm not familiar with what umbrella that falls under. Is that a totally separate thing?
Well, it's definitely a more of a cultural practice, and Vipassana is very popular, and people go on Vipassana retreats, very intensive. And I have heard stories about people who have had really unpleasant experiences in that situation. But I also have heard lots of stories of people who devour the experience and who love, the intensive retreat and the whole sort of experience of it. I see myself as a teaching and proliferating a modern day meditation that doesn't involve cultural background or cultural practices or historic practices in that way, but as a simple and natural, modern, very clear, understated and shortcut kind of meditation, if you like, that doesn't have those trimmings, but that has tremendously beneficial health results.
I have a question about people who use meditation as an escape to dealing with their reality, so their responsibilities in daily life. People who go to retreats thinking that's going to be the miracle solution and the quick fix to all of their problems, and then perhaps they are really relaxed and they feel great during the retreat. They think everything's resolved, and then they come back to reality, come back home, and they think, oh my gosh, I'm in chaos again. My mind is chaos again.
Yes. Well, that's, I think, as I said earlier, in my early years as a young woman practicing Catholic, went to many spiritual retreats, and they were all wonderful. We'd have a wonderful time, but it's a very unreal sort of world, the retreat scenario. So, and I think it's the same thing that you've just described. Really, everything's fine when you're with a lot of like-minded people and you're building that energy with others, and you never want to miss this again. You want to keep in touch with everybody, and it's all beautiful and everything, and then you go home and you face the mundane, the dishes and the bills come in, and the phone rings, and you think, what happened to that last week or something. I think it's just got to be viewed as a wonderful experience at the time, and let's hope that each person who has participated has gained something from it. But and maybe it's life-changing for many, and that's fine. But for the most commonplace people, I don't think you can expect to hold on to that.
So really the recommendation would be, it would be ultimately more effective to have a consistent home practice for yourself that you can take throughout your life.
That's right. One of my books is titled Living Calm. I deliberately use that term to give that incentive, because we can learn something, but if we don't practice it and live it, it's not going to help us. If it's just a one-off or an exciting adventure, well, that's over then. It's like a holiday. But if we build it into our life and take it seriously and simply, it will be there to sustain us.
I want to thank you for your time, and I'm sure that so many people out there who will watch this will definitely understand the benefits of meditation much more.
That's my pleasure. It's been lovely to meet you, Marie-Chantal, and I hope that we'll connect again somehow. That'd be lovely.
I really hope so as well.